What's up, everybody? A Left It Wall update. Left It Wall is now available on Tubi. What does that mean? That means you get to watch it for free. I know there's so many streaming services out there, so many monthly fees, that sometimes renting or buying something just seems like a pain and yet another expense. Well, now it's available free. If you're not already using Tubi, I highly recommend it. You can get it on your smart TV, or you can just watch it online on your computer. Just type in Left It Wall movie, and the Tubi link should come up as one of the available ways to watch it. So if you haven't watched it yet, come on. Now you've got to. Left It Wall on Tubi. Episode 107. Johanna Went. Before Lady Gaga, before Madonna, there was Johanna Went. Johanna Went is a performance artist. She found her home in the LA punk scene of the 1970s after a run doing experimental theater. The Minutemen opened for her. I got to meet her in Vetura because she was on a panel I was moderating for a screening of the film Desolation Center. I was stoked when she agreed to do the show. Please welcome to the show, Johanna Went. All right, Johanna Went, how are you? So good to see you again.
I'm okay. Is anybody okay right now? I'm saying that because it's, we start with small talk, right? That's what we do.
That's what we do. That's what we have to do as the world burns around us.
Yes.
Just how you doing? How was your weekend as
it was all right.
Collapses? Well, it is good to see you, and it was really cool to meet you and do that panel with you. That was so much fun. You stole the show.
I'm goofy, people. And also I love an audience. I actually love my audiences. Even when they don't love me, I love my audience.
They were so excited to see you. Everyone was so stoked you were there. Me, I don't think anyone there had a clue who I was, but everyone was so stoked to see you.
I think most people know my name and know kind of notorious information about me, but I think a lot of the people there probably did not see my shows ever.
Maybe not. I mean, yeah, I don't know. That's tough to say, but I bet, I don't know. Some of the people there seem very, very familiar with you.
Well, I think they're familiar with my reputation, and maybe they saw me on the cover of Slash. I mean, thinking about, and they've seen things, maybe a snatch of a video here. They maybe saw me on New Wave Theater. They, little things, but the way information is today, you don't get the whole picture of someone,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like if I go, well, William Burroughs. Okay, how many of his books have you read?
Yeah,
you know who he is, right?
One. Yeah, I've only read Naked Lunch, though.
Okay, good. You read one. Okay, good.
Got one.
But information, especially fan-based information, was different.
Sure.
Before the internet. And I think that, I still don't know if that means that because someone examined all of Burroughs' writings, and it would be very hard, to actually see him if you didn't live in New York, or you didn't, you weren't a hipster. Maybe you wouldn't know, but you could read a lot about him.
Did you ever cross paths with him?
No, actually, but I know a lot of people that did.
Mm.
I know a lot of people that did. But it's different when you Google somebody or you look at a Wikipedia, which is, it's never quite, you read a Wikipedia and then you go, it's not exactly correct,
Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's flawed. It's a starting point. It's something, but yeah. Well, let's start at the beginning then. Where did you grow up?
Well, I was born in Buffalo, but my family moved to Kansas, and then they moved to Seattle when I was 5. So I usually say Seattle's my hometown, but Los Angeles is really my adopted city. I've lived here since 1975. Although now I live in Ventura, but I still maybe consider Los Angeles my city.
So how long did you grow up in Seattle? Like, was that high school? Was that like the formative years and stuff like that?
Yes, I left Seattle in 1974. So I after high school I went to beauty school, but like because I didn't know what to do, you know.
Hmm.
I couldn't afford to go to college, and I couldn't figure that out. And I wasn't a great student, you know. So I'd taken drama in high school. So I always had this thing about that I could do something, but I didn't really have any specific talent of any kind. Um, and I liked performing, but I wasn't good at it. I wasn't like a very good actor, even in high school. I wasn't. I wasn't a good actor, you know, in the drama class. I was really, really shy. And I had a drama teacher that was gay, which I really liked. It was secretive. Nobody knew. It wasn't, nobody was supposed to know. But,
How'd you find out?
huh?
How'd you find out?
Oh, you know, we knew, but we weren't supposed to
Oh,
know.
okay. Okay, gotcha.
That's the way things worked back then.
Sure.
Like,
No, no, I gotcha.
okay. Um, And I was really shy and awkward, and I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't good at acting, but I did love plays. I liked reading the plays, and my teacher encouraged me to improvise because she would tell me not to care if the class laughed at me when I messed up. And I think that that really inspired me to do what I felt and then just deal with the aftermath of whether the audience liked it or didn't like it, that was kind of not really important, you know. She made me feel like I was an entertainer and not just a fuck up, because if they laughed, they laughed. I got a laugh, you know. And that's better. A lot of times that's better than having people you know, be thoughtful about something that you did on stage, or you know, remember a line. It's a laugh. I mean, you know, right?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. It's one of the best feelings in the world.
Yeah, laugh at me. Okay, I'm good with that.
So you went to beauty school, and was that in Los Angeles, or were you still
Oh,
in
Seattle.
you were in Seattle still at this
Right
point?
after high school, I
Okay.
went, you know, right the summer after high school, I went to beauty school, and I worked I was a bad hairdresser. I just wasn't a good hairdresser. I didn't understand. Nobody explained anything to me ever, you know, when I was a kid. Nobody
Okay.
said, "Oh, what you're actually supposed to do is you're supposed to make the person's hair look the way that they want it to look." And I didn't understand that. I thought that since I was the hairdresser, I was going to be able to decide how they should look. Well, you know, that didn't work out. So I started working at cosmetic counters, like at a local pharmacy, and I would go to small theaters in Seattle and just kind of hang out and see if I could get a little walk-on part. Or mostly I worked in the production. I'd help the actors with their costumes, or, you know, props, sets, you know, that kind of thing. Um,
Where was kind of the theater scene in Seattle then? I ask as someone because I lived in Fremont for 3 years, so I'm a little familiar.
Well, there were theaters all over, but I kind of
Hmm.
hung out this little theater. I think it was called Stage One. Was it called Stage One? I don't know. It was in the farmers It was in the you know, public, the Pike Place
Oh,
Market.
in Pike Place.
It
Oh,
was
cool.
underneath. It was underneath. It was, you know, that whole underground city
I think
feeling
that's still a
in
theater. Yeah.
downtown Seattle. Yeah. Oh, it is.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm pretty sure
Well,
that's still a theater. I don't know what it's called now because I think it's gone through maybe a name or two even just since I've lived there. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that's still a theater. Like just right when you start walking underground towards Pike's Place to the left, there's that theater.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was unremarkable in any role or anything that I did there. And, but yet, like I said, I had this feeling that I somehow was supposed to express myself on stage. And, I just had the feeling. There was nothing, it wasn't rational. There was no reason to believe that, but I did. Um, so in 1974, I was in this really bad production of a Chekhov play, right? And I went to a party with a friend after the cast, and the party was at my friend Alex Soul Dancer. I mean, she wasn't my friend then. I didn't know anybody at the party, but it was at her house. And I walked into the kitchen, and sitting at the table was this guy from New York, and his name was Tom Murren. He later was the alien comic in the East Coast, Lower East Side performance art kind of community, for
Oh, wow.
years.
Okay.
In the very, very beginning. And like me, he also played in clubs sometimes. So anyway, at that time, he had just arrived from Seattle that very day, and he told me that he'd written some plays that were performed at La Mama and different places, and they were directed by John Vaccaro, who was with actors from the Theater of the Ridiculous. So that was, and Tom had been a lawyer for like, I don't know, he passed the bar and he worked in a fancy Beverly Hills law office. And one of the people that came in there was Ava Gardner. She was getting divorced or something. And he was this young, hot lawyer, youngest guy to pass the bar at that time. And he kind of ran away with Ava Gardner and stayed at her villa in Spain. The relationship wasn't a long-term relationship. He was kind of her boy toy for, a couple of months, but their friendship lasted forever. And I think that she was the person who encouraged him to think creatively and that he didn't have to have this 9 to 5, working job. He didn't have to do what his parents, hoped that he would do, since they put him through law school, spent all that money. He lived in like the Hancock Park area. His father worked for Howard Hughes. He was like, everybody would have thought, yeah, I guess his family thought, oh, wow, he has this great job in Beverly Hills. He's a young lawyer. He's just going to succeed in this way that young, successful people were expected to.
Mm-hmm.
And he ran away with Ava Gardner and went to Spain, lived at her villa, thought he was going to be Hemingway, started writing. Sometimes he would paint because then he thought he was going to be Miro, or he had these, he just kept trying like different things, and he ended up in New York, and he went to a Sam Shepard play, and he started thinking in terms of like the kind of off Broadway, productions,
Mm-hmm.
which were certainly really more interesting to him than like Broadway or, the standard fare for like most actors and playwrights. So he wrote a play called Cock Strong. And then he also wrote Son of Cock Strong. I mean, these are two plays that you probably haven't read. Am I right?
I'm not. No. Not really.
Because you know what? Nobody has. Hardly that many people. You would really have to be a fan of that era of off Broadway theater and the avant-garde theater that happened at that time. So anyway, he'd been living. He came to Seattle because he'd been living in this little town called Hump Tulips, Washington, and he was doing plays at this small bar that was frequented by lumberjacks and truck drivers.
Were
Right?
they into it?
No, no, not not so much. Uh, and so he told me that he was going to start performing in Seattle with Alex and her friends, and their theater group, and that he was going to start his own group, and it was going to be called Balloon Theater, and that it was like a happening. Do you know what happenings were? These performances that would take place. I don't know if there's anything. I mean, I guess flash mobs are kind of like that, but
Okay.
this is back in the hippie days of New York, or the maybe also even beatniks.
Okay.
It's like a long time ago. They would show up somewhere and they would do. It's kind of also the origins kind of some performance art.
Okay.
They would come to a place and they would perform an action, and anywhere. It could be in the park, it could be on the street, whatever. So, and I had read about happenings because when I was a little kid at the library, I read about beatniks in like Life magazine, and I was totally fascinated by beatniks. I
Hmm.
mean, it was nothing like any people that I knew. I lived in the projects in Seattle in like White Center. You know where White Center is?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I lived there were projects there then. And I lived there. It was poor. Uh, we were, I went to Catholic school, till I was like in seventh grade. And the whole concept of beatniks totally fascinated me. And I didn't have a lot of information about it, but it stuck in my mind.
Hmm.
This article in Life magazine.
Just knowing that's out there.
I liked the way they looked. I liked their music. My dad was kind of into jazz. My
Hmm.
dad liked this guy named Spike Lee. Not Spike Lee, Spike Jones.
Hmm.
Spike Jones. Um, and he liked jazz, and so I was aware of jazz. So anyway, the happening thing. And he asked me if I wanted to join. And I said, did I have to audition? He goes, oh no, just come to my apartment, wear something interesting, and I'll have all the balloons and the makeup and the glitter, right? So I did. And we went out on the street and we just kind of improvised with these balloons. It was kind of silly. But a photographer from the Seattle paper took a photo of me, and I was on the front page of the paper the next day
Nice.
as like, these freaks are downtown at the Pike Place Market doing whatever. And so I really felt like, you know, I really felt like that was a sign. I
Hmm.
looked for signs back then
Yeah.
because a
Okay.
lot of my life just kind of came to me, when I wasn't paying attention, like when I met Tom, um, I sat down at that kitchen table and both of our lives changed at that moment.
Hmm.
So we started doing all these a lot of street theater. Mostly, sometimes we would perform at a loft, or somebody would, give us a few bucks to do something. But mostly, we did a lot of street things, and we started traveling together to do performances. Um, Tom coined this phrase, whatever's done with purpose and style is performance. And that made sense to me, Um, I didn't want to do plays where people wrote lines and told me what to do. I wanted to do whatever I felt like doing at the moment.
Hmm.
And I made costumes out of trash. We'd throw together these shows. I didn't have to, I wasn't directed by anyone. I was directing myself.
Hmm.
And it was very free form. And at that time, Tom was very much into that too. Sometimes we had a couple of other people that traveled with us and did things, but for the most part, we played colleges,
Oh, wow.
we were hired to perform at parties sometimes, and once we were hired to play during the band break at a Golden Earring concert, this huge concert, and we kept traveling, going from place to place, and we were in Baltimore for a couple of months. We found this little apartment. We thought, well, we'll stay here before we go to New York because that was our intention, and we did like 30 shows in 30 days, every single day.
Wow.
We committed to doing a show. The shows were only like probably a half an hour or so, which my shows too. They were like between a half an hour and 45 minutes or something. And they looked a lot like theater games and, with costumes, a lot of costumes. We used to use a lot of glitter. We kind of lost the balloons after a while because people used to call us the balloon assholes, which was okay. That was, true. And then, and we would just pack up whatever we had in the way of like props or costumes. Costumes were made out of like cardboard or any kind of thing we found at the thrift store, and whatever we could pack. And then we would, wherever we landed, we would go through the trash and find things and then make more things that we would use within the show. And we pretty much planned our shows separately. He would plan his show and I would plan my show. And then whatever happened was the show. And sometimes we'd even set an alarm clock for when it was over.
Oh, wow.
Especially if we were being paid and we had to do like 30 minutes or 45 minutes or something. We would set an alarm clock and then we would start and then we would be doing,
Yeah.
the shows. It was a lot of fun. It was interesting. It was really traveling and not knowing kind of where you were going and what you're going to do was a little difficult for me. We did, then we went to New York and we did shows at a small gallery space called Razor Gallery, which was in Soho in New York. And also we did something at St. Mark's Theater, which was really exciting to me because that's where like really famous dance shows were held in the in the 60s,
Right. Yeah,
which was history to me. But and poets, it was, and plays, really avant-garde work was being done there. So that was really interesting. And then we even went to London and we did some shows. They would have lunchtime theater in these like little tiny theaters in Soho in London. And like really like pensioners would show up, and maybe you'd have like 5 people there. But we had that gig in London, and that's the first time that I saw, punk.
Oh, okay. So what year would this have been?
That was 1975.
Okay.
I think it was 1975 because also I was aware then of Throbbing Gristle. That because they were a band, with music, but they also they did art, it was very much more like performance in my mind with music. And it was very extreme and really radical. They were a really radical group. And so I was and they were doing something at the ICA, which was like a real museum, So, and they were really, like I said, radical. Like they kind of blew my mind. Their work was so intense. I liked bands like I liked Iggy Pop. I liked the New York Dolls, Velvet Underground. Anybody who had some kind of elements, of performance or art, that I could relate to.
So what was your first, like what all encompassed your first punk exposure when you were in London?
That was it. It was like, I wanted to go to the ICA, and actually I was there at the ICA because that's how I found out about Throbbing Gristle, because I was there and I saw this. We ended up like in the basement where they had this little weird puppet show of this guy named Ted Milton, who later was in a punk group called Blurt,
Okay.
which was amazing. They were really amazing. And he at that time was doing something called Mr. Pugh, and he had these weird puppets that didn't look anything like puppets. They would just be any kind of an object, like anything, like a toilet paper roll or like a ball or like something. And he did the strangest puppet show that I've ever seen. It was so odd and it was so weird. And then he invited us to go to Bath, where he lived with his family, and do some kind of one of our performance pieces in this pub, which was like a really packed pub where people just kind of ignored us. and yet we did our show. So, and then I ended up in LA because Tom's family lived in LA. And so we spent a lot of time in LA. And because we could stay there at their house, it was very comfortable, it was nice. They're very, very functioning, high functioning, lovely people, right? They were not exactly, they were supportive of our work in that they thought it was interesting. Because, when you live in Hollywood, like show business is it's not like if you live in Seattle and you're never around anybody that's in show business. People in Los Angeles, there's like lots of show business people, and because his dad worked for Howard Hughes, they respect on some level the idea of oh well, it's show business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so they didn't think that we were really going to ever be successful with what we were doing because it was too weird. It was like my dad. My dad used to say to me, "Well, Johanna, you know what you should do? You should just learn a song, and then you should learn a dance, and then you should just do that every time." That was his advice,
Just get the one song. You're good.
Yeah. Just do something that looks a little bit like what people consider talent, or an actual show of entertainment. So Tom and I kind of split up because he kept wanting to travel, and I really was like going, no, I really have this feeling about Los Angeles, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I started working at this wallpaper warehouse, and the guy at the warehouse had this little coffee shop, right? Like a comedy coffee shop, right? They didn't even have liquor or anything. It was just like this little storefront, and it was on Vermont near Melrose.
Mm-hmm.
It was right around the corner from the Stud Tavern, which was a hot spot. And sometimes people came over from the Stud, but mostly it was a very square audience, mostly friends of comedians,
Okay.
friends or relatives of comedians, and maybe not the best comedians, and I showed up with all my boxes because I would carry things at that time on the bus from like the Rampart district up to Vermont.
Mm-hmm.
In cardboard boxes. Like I would just throw everything in a cardboard box. And sometimes, and that's how I prepared my shows a lot of the time. I just threw things in boxes. And then I would have sometimes a little gimmick or something where I would go, well, okay, I'm going to pull out something like really messy here, some kind of like whatever. I used to put cream corn inside of a rubber shark's mouth and squeeze that out, and it looked like vomit shark. And I had little blood capsule things, or not, little blood loads that I would make that would come out of things. And I would play a little, like a little beatbox, like a small, cassette player. And I would play some kind of music, whatever I could come up with for the day. And I would just show up. I'd get on stage. I'd start the show. And then I would make this mess on stage and scream a lot and fall down and whatever. And the guy, my friend, John Devon, who was the club owner, he loved it. He loved it. And the audiences really did like it. But the comedians like really hated me.
Oh, they didn't like following you, or what was it?
They didn't get it. They
Okay.
didn't, I mean, it was just offensive. It was offensive, I think that there was that idea of like, I don't get why audiences, I don't know why is the audience like laughing at that and they're not laughing at me, maybe.
Yeah.
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 And because I wasn't being funny and I wasn't telling jokes, but there was a certain amount of humor in it. But there also was a certain amount of like, what the hell is that? But the
So,
audience were okay with that.
so the audience was on your side, but the comedians weren't. Well, who won out? Did you get to stay at the coffee shop, or what happened next?
Well, I didn't want to stay there. I mean, I was constantly looking for other places to play, and I started hanging out at punk clubs.
Hmm.
Um, I started hanging out at the Mask, and I started really looking for someone to play music with me, which uh, I didn't have songs or anything. So talking to musicians about that was always kind of weird of like, no, what I want you to do is just get up on the stage and just start playing. When I start, you start. And when I end, you end. Okay.
Yeah.
Not that many people were kind of into that.
Yeah, it's
Well,
a
what's
weird
the
setup.
song? Oh, there's no song. Uh, and this is and this thing that I do, I call that singing, but other people did not. I didn't. So I finally went to the Hong Kong Cafe because that was then a punk club, and I talked the guy into giving me a gig. I told him, I have musical accompaniment, but I do this, and I showed him pictures because I had great photographs, and I also had been like on the cover of the Free Press with. Didn't I send you that? Was that one of the
Yeah,
things
I
that I
think it was in
sent
the
you?
documents. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
With William
Pictures.
Shatner and I were on the same cover, of the LA Free Press, which was, it was like the LA Weekly. It was a free magazine that, hippies looked at
Yeah.
maybe mostly, but people read it, and that was enough. That I showed him all these photos of different places. Oh, here I was in London, and here I did this.
Yeah.
And so he went, okay, then you have music. And I go, yeah, I have music. Okay. And I didn't. So I talked to this guy who was my friend's neighbor. He was a drummer. I said, come and just, finally, I said, I'll pay you. So I paid him like $50 um, of my own money, which was back then a lot of money. And so he showed up late and he played not very well. But the audience at the Hong Kong totally got into the show. They really liked the show. It was wild and it was noisy and I was screaming and then at the end of the show when I was in the back cleaning up all the mess, this guy Zev, who was a wild percussionist, and he played the Mabuhay, he played all the punk clubs himself just as a percussionist, and he played giant instruments that he made out of like car parts, pieces of plastic, metal, any kind of noise thing. But he was really talented. His beats were just amazing, and he worked so hard, and he'd end up cutting himself. He'd have like bloody hands afterwards, and he was wild. He was really, and he came up to me and he goes, "Get rid of that drummer. I'm going to play for you." And I said, "Oh, okay." And he immediately booked shows for us in San Francisco at the Mabuhay. I kept playing at the Hong Kong. We traveled around. We did some shows in New York. And I got my picture on the cover of when I was interviewed for Slash magazine. This is even before my picture was on the cover. Just getting an interview in that magazine that was really the important magazine, you know.
Hmm.
So my career just kind of snowballed. Not that I was making a lot of money or anything, but I became very um, popular on kind of a cult level. I wasn't like the most important person. I wasn't high, I wasn't the headliner. I wasn't a lot of times. Later I was, but I could get gigs, and I was written about a lot, and my photos were taken a lot. So it just took off. It was just another one of those magical meetings. Like I met Tom and then I met Zev.
What made you decide that the punk clubs were a good forum for you? Like just you like being around it, or was there something like something else that really made you migrate there?
Um, well, I have to think about this. I think that I was really lucky to be embraced by the West Coast punk audiences. You know, I'm not an expert on punk rock, and I don't really consider myself a punk, but that's where I attended most of the shows on the West Coast. Those were the bands that I loved because I was of the West Coast. And I liked all the other bands. I liked English bands. I liked bands from New York. I pretty much liked different areas that I would go to. Like, punk bands were different in, say, Cleveland than they were in New Orleans
Hmm.
or Arizona or Texas. And I liked that they all kind of had their own flavor. I was really pulled in by the music, and that there were so many in the early punk scene, which I consider myself more a part of almost the second wave, because the Mask was really the center of the Los Angeles punk scene, right?
Hmm.
And the forming of punk in Los Angeles. And there were so many women in bands. And these young women were wild, they were fierce, and the music was so exciting. It was so exciting to me. It felt like something new, you know. My friend used to tell me that the Mask was like the last non-commercial music scene in Los Angeles, and I kind of think it's true. You know, MTV happened. There were a lot of economic changes. You know, once Reagan, like '80s, you know, Reagan kind of changed. There were economic changes because of the politics of Reagan, and also the police shut down a lot of punk shows. You know, so there was like a pushback. But those early shows, the Mask was an amazing space. It was in a basement. It felt underground. It felt secret, you know, secretive. Brendan Mullen, who started the club, and all the young punks that were in bands, um, there was like a lack of authoritarian rules. It wasn't a commercial venture. It was a kind of a playground for these like hormonal feral children. That's what it felt like. They were younger. I was a little bit older than most of the people that went there, but all ages went there. A lot of people went there that were old hipsters. There were the young punks. You know, it was the place to go in the late 70s. They didn't have a liquor license. You know, there wasn't like crowd control or occupancy limits. Um, but there was an intimacy and an expectation that you were going to see something and hear something and feel something that you couldn't anywhere else.
Yeah. So, like getting back to you,
Does
so
that make
you
any sense?
no, that makes a lot of sense. That's very well put. But so getting back to you, like you started touring, things started just happening. When did touring slow down for you,
I
or
never
just
really toured.
or
I
performing in
mean,
general?
I did shows in I couldn't play like 5 nights in a row.
Hmm.
Um, because I had this idea, which actually was very challenging. But I had this idea that I should never repeat my shows.
Mm.
And so, as complicated as the preparation was for my shows, which is a whole lot of costumes, a whole lot of props, hauling all of that stuff to the performance space, unloading it. Then when I played with bands, I had sound check. I couldn't play show after show after show because not like bands, I didn't get up on stage and do a set of songs that had been rehearsed and already worked out and you could do night after night after night. So my performances were, kind of there would be a week or 2 or 3 weeks in between.
Mm.
And it would be one show.
Hmm. So when did just performing kind of slow down for you?
Uh, I started performing more art spaces. When I first played clubs, like clubs were really that was the most interesting part of my life. It was the most exciting. It was the most thrilling. The club shows were really ecstatic experiences. I felt that the audiences, the way they responded, um, is so much different than playing art spaces.
Hmm.
But I started playing more art spaces because my shows they became more complicated. They became bigger. I started wanting to have other people in the shows, wearing the costumes, doing things. Um, and also, performance spaces suddenly kind of would let me perform there because in the early days, they didn't want me, because I wasn't really, they didn't consider me to be real art, I guess,
Hmm.
which was all right because all the people that I was performing for, a lot of them would come to me afterwards and they go, "Oh, I've never met an artist before. Oh, I never saw real art. Oh, I didn't understand art."
So there was sort of like a for the people element to like what you were doing.
Well, yes. I mean, and it wasn't just because I was trying to do that.
Hmm.
Like I said, those other spaces, they also didn't want me, you
Hmm.
know, which was all right. I mean, when I look back on my career, I go, I probably could have done that at, a museum or I could have, but a lot of times I would go somewhere, even performance spaces that put on kind of interesting work that was a little bit more off the wall, would say to me, well, give me a proposal. Tell me exactly what you're going to do. And this blood thing, no, And
Mm.
so I would go, okay, I guess this isn't going to work. And so I wouldn't do it. I absolutely wouldn't do it. And I used to be kind of upset about that afterwards, like, oh, they're trying to stop me from doing my work. But then I realized it's like, no, that's that space and that's that audience. And this is me. And I have this space and this audience. And honestly, my audience is way more interesting and certainly give me more on during my performances than an audience that is sitting there kind of mulling over what is actually going on the stage. I like my audience to respond with their gut, not with their brain. I want it to be a visceral experience. The show does not have to make sense, because you know what? It doesn't make any sense. It's a dream, like an absurd, surreal dream, like a ritual. My costumes, they don't, you can't identify them as a creature or a person because they don't make sense. Although, I wear them, they seem like they're alive. Sometimes they feel like a kind of animal, or that they have human personalities. But really, most of them, some of them you could look at. Okay, like you could go, oh yeah, that is a two-headed nun. And it is. But other ones, you look at them and you go, I don't know, why are there like false teeth and the hot dog, and like there's big holes in that costume where there probably shouldn't be. They don't look like, and that jacket is something my grandmother, would wear to her bridge club. And so it's not identifiable in the way that iconic, there's like a series of chaotic iconic imagery thrown together.
Well, how would you describe it to someone who's just completely unfamiliar? Like if they've never seen anything like what you do before, how would you describe it to them?
Well, I can't describe it and say that it's like something else. At that time, there weren't, there wasn't somebody like Lady Gaga wore a meat costume. Well, I wore a meat costume, 25 years before that. But there wasn't a lot of people. They wouldn't look at it and go, oh yeah, Lady Gaga. Well, no, that was, that came later. There weren't people using a lot of blood on stage. I mean, Alice Cooper did things that were very theatrical, but they also were theatrical pieces that he repeated all the time, songs, and then there was the acting out of the songs. I didn't do that. My idea was that I was acting out dreams, that I was acting out like imagery that would come to me in dreams. Also, I'd write my dreams down, and it would start like a dream. There would be the sounds, the music, the singing. That would also be like in a dream. It came to me when I was on the stage, or it came to me in the way that I reacted to a costume that I was wearing, or the way that I moved a prop, or the way somebody looked at me in the audience. I could sing anything. I could say anything. I could fall down if I wanted to. If I didn't feel like it, I could stop in the middle. I could chop something up with a hatchet. A lot of blood always came out. There was meat parts. I would go to the Grand Central Market and get goats' heads and pigs' heads. These were rituals that I would perform, but they weren't necessarily planned. But they were kind of on. I went to a lot of horror films. I was a big horror fan, right? So I guess that you could say there were elements of that, of having experienced like so many horror films, of seeing so much, that I always saw that part of my show as like a painting, And when I would say I was performance art, I was in a way performing the imagery as a painter would perform as they were painting, but it's done in front of an audience.
So what made you step back from performing?
Um, I haven't performed. So I think the last shows that I did, the actual like huge productions were like around 2000, like around 20 years ago now, right?
Hmm.
2006,
Hmm.
2008, I think. And then I've done like a couple of small kind of pieces that were more like, um, kind of like panel discussions that went wrong. I've done a couple of those things, and I've done like retrospectives of my costumes and my props and my art. But the actual performing is, I uh, I can't do what I used to do. I mean, I just can't. I mean, did you ever go to clubs and like pogo and do like the mosh pit and do all that kind of thing?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Can you do that now?
I mean, probably not. Yeah,
Okay.
probably not. At least not the way I used to. Yeah, probably.
Yeah. Well, I broke my ankle in 1990 and it's been a constant
Hmm.
problem for me. And now, of course, I'm old. I'm old. And you know what? It doesn't feel, I don't, everyone goes, oh, you should just do something like, like you used to do. And then I go like, I don't think so.
You don't
I,
want to?
no, I don't want to because if you did something that was like really, I, it's like Muhammad Ali didn't like keep getting in the ring
Sure.
after a
Yeah.
certain point. He went kind of like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to show up and I'm going to sign autographs and I'm going to talk about, whatever.
No, no, I get you.
But the biggest drawback for me in terms of the performances is actually the preparation and the cleanup, which seriously,
No, I believe it.
those took like, weeks in preparation. Then it would be weeks sometimes it would take me 2 weeks to get everything cleaned up and packed back, especially the larger shows later on, and hauling things around. And everybody always goes, oh no, you know what? I'll be your roadie or I'll come, or, we've got these young like interns, they can help you. Uh, I always would end up hauling stuff, carrying stuff, unpacking stuff, cleaning up the mess. You have to some degree. You can't tell like a young intern, like, oh yeah, that has like brain guts from that goat's head, and you probably want to like wash it out. And
Wear gloves
oh,
for that
that's
one.
yeah. Here's how you get the stain out. You know, um, I don't know. It's a very personal process, and it would end up exhausted afterwards to the point that I couldn't walk. So
Mm.
yeah. I mean, look, I got old, and I like being old. I don't like my body kind of being like worn out. But there's things about my life that I really like. I have a
Hmm.
lot of time to read.
Nice. Yeah. Well, in closing, then, where would you like to direct people if they want to learn more about you?
Oh, they should not do that. They absolutely should not do that.
You're the first
I'm
guest to
not
ever give that
recommending
answer.
that. I'm not recommending that. Just like swipe a bunch of like stuff on your phone, like, anything. I recommend that people see a lot of films. I like movies. I suggest that they read a lot of books and check out things like beyond Google because you're gonna miss out on some like really there's history is one of the most interesting things because it always repeats itself in some form. Everything is derived from something that's already happened and I do believe that there's nothing new.
Joanna, thank you so much for doing this.
Okie dokie. This is how I talk now. Okie dokie. I say things like up the kazoo. Yeah, this is me, like in my old age, right? Like I get like all wound up about things. Thank you very much. I would come and visit me sometime. Then you can actually talk about you, and then I'll know things about you, like secret things that you don't want to tell anybody. That would be perfect.
That was Johanna Went. Yeah, just Google her if you're not familiar. She is a legend. It was so cool to talk to her and to get to know her. And by the way, she texted me I hope she doesn't mind me sharing this, but she did text me to let me know that she enjoyed Left It Wall, even though there was no murder in the movie. That was her feedback. Music for the 1000 podcast is provided by Andrew Saxon. Be sure to check out his podcast, the Baywatching Podcast, wherever you get your podcast. Leave us a 5-star review, would you? And please make sure you are subscribed wherever you get your pods, and tell your friends, and email us romplaconebooking@gmail.com. Who do you want to hear on 1000? Who do you want me to interview? We only got 1,000 spots, so get your requests in. Do not wait. All right, we are at 107. 107. What's significant about 107? I feel like there's something about that number that kind of sticks out to me, but it's not hitting me what. It'll come after, and that'll be too late, because 107 only comes once. There will not be another 107. Every one of these numbers is unique. All right, see you next week. Peace. Hey guys, Ron Placone here. Take your own 1000 challenge. No, you don't need to interview 1,000 people, although if you want to do that, go for it. Your 1000 challenge can be whatever you want. Maybe you want to call a friend out of the blue once a week. Maybe you want to read a book every month. Maybe you want to start a different garden every season. I guess that might be dependent on where you live. Look, the point of the challenge is taking on an endeavor that enriches your life in some way, and it can be measured. And then, of course, you do it regularly. That's what 1000 is doing for me, and hopefully for you too. The main reason for this podcast and every podcast I've ever done is to build community. So take your own challenge. Then join our Facebook group. It's called 1000 What's Your Challenge? ? That's 1000 What's Your Challenge ? And post about what your 1000 challenge is and the progress you're making. All I ask is that people be encouraging of each other's challenges. This is personal and vulnerable, so be cool. There's enough negativity on social media. We don't need to add to it. For those of you who aren't on Facebook, hopefully in the future we'll be expanding to places like Discord, Reddit, but for now, we're starting on Facebook. And again, that Facebook group is called 1000 What's Your Challenge? See you there.